Hello, in this video we're going to go over the basics of sculpting in ZBrush. So in this project I've just opened up the Lightbox default project that we went over in the introduction to the ZBrush video. And again, if I hit comma, go to project, and double click on this Dynamesh sphere, that's how I got to this point. So feel free to do that and follow along. Make sure that your drawing tablet is set up and pressure sensitivity is working. So first off, if we hover over the sphere here and click and drag, you'll notice that we are making sculpting marks on the sphere. All right, and by default, symmetry is turned on. You can see that my brush on the opposite side of the axis, there is a dot which represents the symmetrical location. And whenever I sculpt, it's sculpting on the other side. Very frequently, we do want to have symmetry on because we want to be working on more than one side at the same time. And then towards the latter half of the sculpt, we will break symmetry by turning symmetry off. However, to toggle symmetry on and off, you can hit the X as an X-ray on the keyboard. So I've just turned it off. I can hit X and turn it on again. All right. To change your brush size, I can come up here to draw size, this slider, and click and drag on it, and that will change your brush size. I prefer to hit S as in Sam on the keyboard, and that draw size slider will show up wherever your cursor is, and then you can just immediately click and drag to change the size of your brush. Every brush has different presets, different options and settings already set up on them, and it is possible to make your own brush as well. The main brushes that we will use to sculpt have a setting called Z Add turned on. You can see it right here. And what this does is it simulates adding material to the sculpt. Okay. If you want to subtract, or Z-sub, or dig into the mesh, you can hold Alt, and you'll see you'll get a little minus sign next to your cursor, and then click and drag, and you'll dig into the mesh. I could also permanently toggle that on by clicking on this Z-sub, and now I am digging in. And if I were to hold Alt, it would select the alternative, which would be Z-add, and then I could pull out. I'll change it back to Z-add for now. To undo, you can hit Control-Z as many times as you wish. Notice that whenever I hit Control-Z, this slider is moving from the right to the left. See that? So this is your undo history. And I can click and drag on this and go to any point in the sculpt that I want to continue from. All right. As you continue to save your progress, your undo history will get really bloated, and it could slow down your sculpting depending on what system you're on. So just know that if it gets really big, you'll need to delete it, but should be good for most of us. All right, so on the top left, we have the brushes, and right now we are using the standard brush. If I click here, we'll open up the brush menu. You can see there are quite a lot of default brushes that come with ZBrush, and most of these we won't be using, at least not right away. And I will be teaching, a number of brushes that you should be focusing on for a beginner. I can access this menu anywhere I am by hitting B as in boy on wherever my cursor is, the menu will pop up. So a very popular brush, one that you should know, is the Move brush. And when you first open up the brush menu by hitting B, you'll look through for Move, right? So first of all, this is alphabetical. So I could come down, I could say, okay, here's M, right? M, morph, right? So I could find Move in here. There it is. I can hit M to isolate by brushes that start with the letter M. And then I have these secondary letters, right, like S, and Move's secondary letter is V. So I could click on Move, or I could just hit V. So I know that to get to the Move brush, I can hit B and then M and then V. And I can do that very quickly, right? So I go BMV to get to the move brush. I also like the clay buildup brush, and that's one you should know as well. And I know that to get to that brush, I can hit B, C, and B again. So BCB, BMV, BCL for just clay. So the brushes that you should know are the move brush, the clay buildup brush, the clay brush, and the damn standard brush. All right. And there's several others that we'll go over too, but that'll be a good start. Let's talk about clay buildup. So I'm going to go B for brush, C for clay, and B for buildup, clay buildup. When the clay buildup brush simulates adding strips of clay onto your mesh, all right? Looks like this. It uses a square alpha, which is why it has this sort of like blocky, chunky feel to it. The move brush will take groups of polygons and you can pull and push them around, right? So it's as if you're sticking your thumb and pressing it in, or grabbing a bunch and pulling it out. If you hold shift, your cursor will turn blue, and you'll notice in the top left here that the brush has changed to smooth, and I can click and drag and I can smooth the sculpt. You could think of smooth as kind of an eraser, and sometimes you don't want to smooth too much because you'll lose all the character of your sculpt. So frequently when I am smoothing, instead of clicking and dragging, I am holding shift and then just kind of tapping like this. All right, the brush damn standard, which is BDS, digs inward by default, and it makes a line, like a sharp inward cut like this. This is very helpful when you're trying to help define wrinkles or tight edges. If I hold Alt, I can pull out in a sharp sort of way. All right, so damn standard. This is a brush you should know as well. Let's look at clay. See, clay has a sort of softer effect, and it's going to fill in the recesses of your sculpt of areas before it starts to add. All right, if I hold Control down, you'll see that I get the mask pen, and I can click and draw a mask on the mesh, right? And now if I were to, let's go back to damn standard. If I were to, so let's go to clay buildup. If we're to sculpt, you'll see that I cannot sculpt where that mask is. It's blocking it off, right? So this can be very helpful. To clear the mask, I can hold Control and click and drag outside of the mesh and let go, and it will clear the mask. To invert the mask, I can hold Control and click outside the mesh, and it will invert the mask. Also, on the right-hand side, there is this masking menu, and all the controls for that are located in here as well. So I'll clear the mask again. I can hold Control, click and drag, and I can make a rectangle and mask with a rectangle. I can hold Control, click and drag, and once I have the shape of the rectangle I want, I can hold spacebar and move that rectangle around and let go to mask like that as well. If I hold Control, I can click on the brush palette and I can access different mask brushes as well. All right, I'm going to go back to my clay buildup brush, and let's take in here, out here. On the right hand side, you'll see that there's this line fill, and I can click on it, and now we can see the polygons on this mesh. And up here we can see how many points, how many polys we have, 43,000 polys or points. And as I'm sculpting, notice that I'm not actually adding material to this mesh, right? It's looking that way, which is nice, but really what's happening is it's just pulling and pushing polygons in different ways, right? So one thing I can do if I want to, let's say I just want to get more detail over here, right? Like wrinkles and stuff. And I can't get that because we don't have enough poly density. I can hit Control D as in dog to essentially subdivide this. So that I get more poly density. Notice that now I have 174,000. If I do it again, Control D, now I'm at 696,000. I can keep going up and up. Over here, if I go to geometry, you'll see here are my subdivision levels. So subdivision level 1, I can still go down to that 43,000 points, and I can still sculpt here, right? This is very powerful. And I can come all the way back up to subdivision level 4, and any changes I made down at a lower subdivision level will, subdivide all the way back up to subdivision level 4. So that's great, and we'll be covering subdivisions more intensely in a future lesson. One thing I do want to cover now is, let's say I'm trying to, create some sort of interesting detail like this, and I'm getting this really bizarre artifacting here, right? And I can no longer create details without stretching these polygons out. So if I turn that line fill back on, you'll see that I have a lot of poly density here, right? I can make interesting sculpts with lots of detail, but I can't sculpt like that over here. And that's just because these polygons have been stretched to their limit and now are distorting. So the project that we are using is already set up to use a tool called Dynamesh. And what Dynamesh does is it rewraps the wireframe or polygons around the model so that you can continue sculpting and avoid this problem. This project that we loaded already has Dynamesh turned on. If it didn't, if you were sculpting something of your own that you start with, then you could open up geometry, go down here to Dynamesh, and turn this on here. But now that it's on, I can hold Control, click and drag, and let go, and you'll see that it has rewrapped polygons around this area. Now I can keep sculpting on it, right? This got so distorted that I'm getting like holes and stuff here, so maybe I would want to, smooth this out a bit, and then Dynamesh again to rewrap the polygons again. And then I can continue now that I've cleaned it up, right? So the basic workflow, especially when you're just doing sketching and trying to get some ideas out there, would be to, start sculpting. Once your polygons start to stretch, then go ahead and Dynamesh, and then continue along your way. When you Dynamesh, you will lose some details of your sculpt, and so you don't want to you do not want to get one area highly detailed and then Dynamesh, because you'll lose a lot of that detail and have to sculpt it again. There are some ways to mitigate that, but overall that's just the general rule that you'll want to kind of follow. Okay. So Dynamesh again. So just like in other 3D programs or 3D software, when you're making something, it's typically a bad idea to have the entire thing made out of one piece. Organic objects or creatures, can be sculpted out of one piece, but it's usually better to have multiple pieces depending on, what exactly you're sculpting. A good example of this would be eyes. It's a good idea to have the eyes be a separate piece on the mesh. And inside of ZBrush, when you have a model, a tool, a Z tool that you're working on that has more than one piece, those individual pieces are called subtools. And over here we have the subtool menu. And you see I have one subtool here. And if I want another one, then I can click on this append, and I could choose one of these default shapes. So I'll choose a sphere here. And you'll see that the sphere shows up right in the middle. Now I have two subtools. I can click on the eyeball to toggle a subtool on and off. if I have that subtool, if I have a particular subtool selected and I click on the eyeball, nothing will happen. So whatever subtool you have selected is always going to be visible by default. I can hold Alt and click on subtools to select them inside the viewport. So I don't always have to go to my subtool menu to choose a subtool that I want to work on. Once I have a subtool, right, so let's say I want this to be an eyeball, I can hit W to go to my move tool and scale this down. This would be the same as clicking on this. And then I'll come over here. Make an eye like this. Then I could take this and duplicate it and drag this eye over here, right? And then I could go ahead and sculpt eyelids and things like that if I wanted. And in future lessons, we will work quite a bit with subtools, but for now, just know that this is the subtool menu. You need to hit append to attach new subtools, and you can sculpt on subtools individually without impacting the other sculpt tools. You can also toggle them on and off. All right, as you're sculpting, you should always be using reference, and you should have your reference open on another screen in front of you, just so it's visible. And there are many, many ways to use reference inside of ZBrush, and the most basic way to kind of use reference directly is at the top. Well, first of all, I have a horse head here. Okay, I just found this on Google Images. And let's say I want to sculpt a horse head, and this is one of the references that I have. I can have this behind the ZBrush window. And then up here, up top, the see-through slider, I can drag this to make the entire program semi-transparent, see-through, right? So I can drag this up, and now I could continue sculpting on my work, right, and lining things up, and maybe I wanted to sculpt like a horse head, right? So just know that this is a pretty cool and powerful tool. If you hover over this again, it'll make it so that the window is not see-through. But just know that this is here, and it might be something you want to play with. All right, let's talk about saving. There are a couple of ways to save, and I'm first going to go over the preferred method of saving, or the way that I would like you to save. And that is to go to File and hit Save As up here. So when you save a file, what it's going to save is your camera rotation, wherever you were last at. It'll save your undo history. It'll save any material changes you've made and have applied to here. It's going to save all of these subtools that currently exist in your file. All right. So that's good. This save will be larger. However, there is another save. You could hit Save As right here, which would create a save of the Z tool. So if I click here, Save As, you'll see it's saving as Z tool. I could name this. And then later on, if I wanted to work on this again, I could come over here and hit Load Tool and select that Z tool, and it would just load in here. But it would not have any of the other tools in here or any of the other settings for your file that you previously had. So just know that that is an option, but you should, for now, just be sticking with this File, Save As. One thing I've seen some students do is go to Document, Save As. And if you go to Document, Save As, that's going to save a 2D image of your sculpt that you can no longer sculpt on. So do not use Document, Save As. All right, great. So that should be enough to get you started on some sculpting, and we'll see you in some future videos where we get into techniques and some more advanced ideas on how to approach sculpting. What I would recommend you do is to pick an animal, a head or a foot or just a body part of an animal, and try to sculpt it. It could even be, a fantastical animal. Make a unicorn or an ogre head or something like that. And yeah, just start with, the Dynasphere. Start with the Dynasphere and start off with the Move tool. and go from there. And we'll see you in the next video.